Welcome back. You're watching Your World at 10. Now, over the last few days, many economists have raised concerns about GDP downgrades for India if the monsoons stay as deficient as they have been and as they are forecast to be. Well, tonight we speak to two key consumer businesses which are directly impacted by a deficient monsoon, FMCG and two-wheelers. Let's start first with FMCG. Dalip Sehgal, Managing Director of Godrej Consumer, joins us now. Mr. Sehgal, thank you very much for joining us on Your World at 10. Like I just said, we've had a variety of economists on this show talking about GDP downgrades for India. But what are you picking up in terms of, the noises on ground? Is that worry translating into consumer demand?
I think two or three things. The first one is that I think the situation on the ground is changing almost every day. So 2 days ago, I think there was doom and gloom probably. But I think in the last 48 hours, it's been raining quite a bit, especially in the north. I've also just come back from Punjab and I've seen a fair bit of rain happening there. So I think that's the first reality, which is that things are changing on the ground every day. The second is that if you look at contribution of agriculture today to the GDP growth and the various numbers that are floating around, but I think one key number that I would focus on is the fact that agriculture is about 17% of the GDP. And the Kharif crop accounts for about a half of the production of agriculture produced in this country. So if you're really looking at this monsoon and saying it is deficient, then the fact is that the impact on the overall GDP growth would be not very large. Number three, I think in most of the categories, especially in FMCG, I think what really happens is that people continue to buy products, but they probably buy more frequently. They focus on lower unit price packs, and to that extent I think the impact, even if the monsoon was to be bad finally, would be far less than it was, let's say, in 2002, which was a pretty bad year.
Right. In fact, many people have drawn that comparison. Mr. Sehgal, in your assessment, how much less can that impact be compared to 2002? Can you give me an estimate of how much you expect consumer sentiment and therefore demand likely to taper off?
Yeah, I think it will dampen consumer sentiment. The question is that in which categories will it dampen the sentiment and how will consumers react? The reason why I say that I think 2009 is very different from 2002 is the fact that agriculture was a far bigger contributor. I think almost a quarter of the GDP came from agriculture. The second thing is that over the last 18 to 24 months, there's been a fair bit of investment that's gone into rural India, whether it's the NRE, GP or a large number of other schemes. So a lot of money has actually gone in there. The second thing is that if you look at the prices of agricultural produce, the minimum support prices have gone up in the last 2 years by almost 30 to 40% and in some cases as much as 60 and 70%. So I think the realization in the farm sector would be far better. So if the volume production, let's say, is less by 10% or 15%, I think that's going to be more than made up by the kind of prices that the farmer would get. So if you ask me, will the impact be very serious in the current financial year? My own sense is perhaps not, certainly not on most of the FMCG categories.
All right, I'm glad you mentioned prices because inflation is also a worry or could be one down the line. But I'm more curious, how are FMCG companies, and I agree that your products are the last to get hurt in a downturn, how are you working to mitigate the impact of this deficient monsoon? Are we looking at potential price cuts in some of your product categories? Or, what about the input cost or the raw material cost situation? Does it allow you to do price cuts?
I think if you look at the commodity prices, especially for categories like, say, soaps, where I think vegetable oil prices have gone up in the last 4 to 6 weeks. So I'm not so sure whether the scenario is right for a price cut. I think the sensible strategy really would be to see what is affordable in terms of a price point. If you look at the last couple of years, the two price points that have become very, very important in this market, especially in the soaps market, are the 5 rupee and the 10 rupee price point. I think one of the things that we are doing is aggressively pushing both these price points on our key brands like Number One and Synthol. The other is that I think there is still a lot that needs to be done in terms of just physical reach into rural India. So I think whatever loss there may or may not be, fact is that if companies were to go deeper down, the gains would still come. So I think it's a combination of getting the price points right. It's a combination of making sure that your overall offering is in sync with what the consumer may need if the money is limited in his pocket. And finally, remember one thing, FMCG is only about 5 or 6% of the wallet. So the extent of, let's say, the impact would be quite minimal. But having said that, I think the two key strategies that we are certainly looking at is pushing the smaller unit price packs and extending our reach into rural India deeper down.
All right. So the key takeaway, Mr. Sehgal, from this conversation is that you're not expecting the impact to be that very much on FMCG because of the deficient monsoon. Thanks very much for joining us, Mr. Sehgal. Let's now get you the two-wheeler picture with Ravi Sood, Chief Financial Officer of Hero Honda. Well, Mr. Sood, thanks very much for joining us. You probably just heard Mr. Sehgal talk about the impact of a deficient monsoon and how it's likely to be limited on FMCG. What's your assessment of how it will hurt two-wheelers?
You see, there are two comments I would like to make first. Number one is, our industry is slightly different from FMCGs. They make some product which are, absolute necessary. We make a product which is not absolutely necessity, but, you can call it in the category of luxury as far as people who stay in rural areas and all. And in our case, 40% of the, sales come from rural areas. I think, lack of monsoon or deficiency in the rainfall, I mean, what we have experienced in the months of June and July, and similarly in the month of August, I mean, we are already 15 days in August, and I need to wait for another 10 to 15 days to see what actually is the impact. According to us, I think there is going to be a lagged impact. Maybe impact, we are not seeing any impact immediately, but I think in the third quarter, maybe starting November or December, and which may go up to fourth quarter, we are definitely feeling that there could be some impact on the demand of our products.
All right. So if you're saying lagged impact, Mr. Sood, that means that we'll only really see this reflected in earnings in January next year, and that's when we'll really know how bad things are. But to get a sense of what kind of impact or how much that impact is likely to be, is there some way you can, let's say, compare this situation that we're seeing today in terms of a deficient monsoon to 2002? That's what lots of economists are doing. Is it as bad as that year? Any way to quantify what that impact is likely to be?
You see, whatever little I remember about 2002, 2003 drought, immediately after the festival season, which was in end of October, beginning November, the sales had dropped by anything between 7 to 10% at that point of time. Now, I don't know whether that's the right indicator to see whether sales will decline by 7 to 10% even in the current year. I think we'll have to wait and see what would be the actual impact.
All right. In fact, the one thing that you might have to worry about, which FMCG probably doesn't have to as much, is, the situation on interest rates. We've already seen food prices continuously increase over the past many, many months, and that is leading to some concern about what could happen to inflation a few months down the line, and therefore what happens to the central bank's neutral stance on interest rates. How do you think that will affect things? What do you expect will pan out over the next few months?
I think we got to see the whole issue in a bigger perspective. I think, if the monsoon fail, I think the overall calculations of Indian economy's growth of 6.8% or close to 7% will need to be revised. And once that happens, I think, one of the biggest things in the budget has been, fiscal deficit of 6.8%. My own fear is that, in case monsoon fail, I think the overall economic growth will come down, and I think government will have to seriously look at all its numbers, in terms of the fiscal deficit and the overall borrowing. Number two, I think definitely there is going to be impact on the interest. And the inflation, because today we are sitting in a situation of where WIP is in the negative category, but as far as CPI is concerned, according to me, I think it's more than 10%. And you have very rightly said, the food prices have definitely gone up, I think, by 40-50%. I think going forward, I fear there could be pressure on inflation as well as on the interest rates.
By how much, Mr. Sood? How much do you think rates will go up by, and when? What are the numbers you're working with? And therefore, what is the likely impact then on growth numbers in the two-wheelers industry?
You see, as I said, the impact will come after a lag. So as far as Q2 is concerned, I think we are pretty comfortable and will sail through. But I think once the actual impact starts coming, if any, I don't know whether there will be any impact, because I understand there are some positive factors in the economy this time compared to 2002, 2003. One is the MSTs are much higher than what they were about 5-6 years back, and there's a lot of money, which has gone into people's pockets on account of 6 pay commission. These are positive factors. People do have money now, so very difficult to quantify. But I think maybe after Q2, sometime in November or so, I think we'll definitely seeing some impact. And as far as impact on the interest rates is concerned, I think my own assessment is because of the government borrowing, which majority of which has to be completed by September 2009. I feel that interest rates will start moving up after September.
You're saying that rates will start moving up after September itself?
Yeah. After September, I think immediately after the borrowing is completed. And on top of it, in case, you have the impact of the monsoons, my assessment is interest rates may start moving up.
All right, that is a slightly gloomy outlook on interest rates, but thanks very much, Mr. Sood. The industry, they're still trying to determine the impact of a deficient monsoon on consumer goods and how it's going to impact consumer demand. Well, there you had it. Dalip Sehgal and Ravi Sood telling us what the impact is likely to be. Time for a quick break on Your World at 10.